Hello, come in. Hi, oh, here comes George to greet you. George has been being a very good dog on the rug there. But anyway, come in. Chaos has come again, as the fellow says. But in fact, I was I thought I'd show you a little bit of John Betjeman's poetry. I got this Betjeman. You see, it's perched precariously here, where it really shouldn't be. This book, Betjeman's Britain, because I took it out of a shelf and I can't actually remember. I can't find the gap for it anywhere. So you can see all the other books that are on their sides are all books that they have a home to go to, but they just can't find their way home at the moment. Anyway, this is quite a nice book. It's the Folio Society. Again, I got it second hand under a tenner. It was £9. The lovely slipcase. And all these classic black and white photos. Betjeman was a great 20th century poet. But because he wrote quite a lot of light verse, this is wonderful, the pigs in a stately home, that's kind of social comment right there. So he, as well as writing poetry, wrote wonderful prose guides to all the reaches of Britain in a series that Shell put together. And this is mostly those, but with bits of poetry. It's wonderful. Bits of, but he didn't just write about picturesque thatched cottages with a rose tree. He wrote about metro land. He wrote about very ordinary things, as you'll see in the poem I'm going to read with you. Anyway, I thought you might like to see that. There he is, classically with his flat cap. He was poet laureate, and in fact, when he died, one of the posh Sundays, writing a eulogy for him, summed him up as teddy bear to the nation, which is quite fun but a little patronising. And in fact, I think he's a poet of a really high calibre, and because he was so easy and accessible and used ballad and rhymed forms and against the trend of the fashion, and because he wrote about railways nostalgically, and he founded the Victorian Society, he was kind of put into this little slightly fun, cuddly, nostalgic niche. He was actually a person of considerable and thoughtful faith, and like many poets, had a real sacramental sense. And so I thought, later on, if you're able to drop round near a Christmas, I'll read you for fun the famous Christmas poem of his, perhaps his most famous poem. But I thought, just for tonight, I'd read you. This is really nice. This is a real easy, kind of handy, take on travelling, go-to Betjeman book. It's the best of Betjeman's. Wonderful photo of Betjeman. He's looking very dapper in his boater, and it's quite a smart suit. But he's also looking a bit furtive. He looks to me just like a sort of 4th or 5th form boy would look if they were smoking a cigarette behind the bike sheds. And that's effectively what he's doing, although it's in a cigarette holder, so carrying a couple of books. This is Penguin Classics. I love the Penguin Classics. I have a whole series of books in the Penguin Classics. Anyway, I want to read you a poem which is perhaps unpromisingly titled St Saviours Aberdeen Park, Highbury, London North. As it happens, I know Aberdeen Park because a very good friend of mine and their family lived there, and I used to visit them from college. And this poem, it's the best example, I think, in the 20th century of the realisation of George Herbert's dictum that prayer is heaven in ordinary. Because it starts in the most ordinary way, and then it comes to transfiguration. It's ostensibly a poem about a not very remarkable large brick neo-Gothic Anglo-Catholic church kind of stuck on a traffic island in Highbury. But what it's really a poem about is it's about the Blessed Sacrament, because in this church is the reserved sacrament, and the poet, the chain-smoking poet, is nevertheless captivated by its presence. So let me read you St Saviours Aberdeen Park, Highbury, London, N. With oh such peculiar branching and overreaching of wire, trolley-bus standards pick their threads from the London sky, diminishing up the perspective, Highbury-bound, retire threads and buses and standards with plane trees volleying by, and more peculiar still, that ever-increasing spire bulges over the housetops, polychromatic and high. Stop the trolley-bus, stop! And here, where the roads unite of weariest, worn-out London, no cigarettes, no beer, no repairs undertaken, nothing in stock, alight. For over the waste of willow-herb, look at her, sailing clear, a great Victorian church, tall, unbroken, and bright in a sun that's setting in Willesden and saturating us here. These were the streets my parents knew when they loved and won, the brougham that crunched the gravel, the laurel-girt paths that wind geranium beds for the lawn, Venetian blinds for the sun, a separate tradesman's entrance, straw in the mews behind, just in the 4-mile radius where hackney carriages run, solid Italianate houses for the solid commercial mind. These were the streets they knew, and I, by descent, belong to these tall, neglected houses divided into flats. Only the church remains, where carriages used to throng, and my mother stepped out in flounces, and my father stepped out in spats, to shadowy stained glass matins, or gaslit evensong. And back in a country quiet with doffing of chimney hats, great red church of my parents, cruciform crossing they knew, over these same encaustics they and their parents trod, bound through a red brick transept for a once familiar pew, where the organ set them singing and the sermon let them nod. And up this coloured brickwork the same long shadows grew as these in the stencilled chancel, where I kneel in the presence of God. Wonder, beyond time's wonders, that bread, so white and small, veiled in golden curtains, too mighty for men to see, is the power which sends the shadows up this polychrome wall, is God, who created the present, the chain-smoking millions, and me. Beyond the throb of the engines is the throbbing heart of all, Christ. At this Highbury altar, I offer myself to thee. I think that's great devotional poetry, and more than most people would expect from Betjeman, but there it is. We'll catch up with his really famous Christmas poem later, but thanks for dropping by.